Welcome back, episode 2 of our mini golf tutorial, everyone. We are going to be breaking this into 2 episodes. We are going to create the script that controls shooting the ball. This is going to be a pretty substantial script. It does have over 100 lines of code, so feel free to slow down this video or repeat where you need to, or speed it up if you like. Please make sure you are entering the same numbers as me, especially when it comes to the code, because we need the ball to be controlled the exact same way in every single hole that each of you are creating. So let's get right into this. First, I'm just going to make a couple tweaks to the ball in the inspector here. So go to the ball. We're first going to move it back on the Z to -7. I just want to move our ball back here. And then I also want to add a little bit of drag. Now, if I don't add this drag, the ball will move way too fast and it won't have enough friction, and we need to simulate some drag like a normal golf ball would on the grass or turf. We also need to change collision detection from discrete to continuous. Discrete works good for slower moving games, but this ball's going to fly pretty fast sometimes and we don't want to miss any collisions. So continuous is going to detect more of those collisions. Now, I'm just going to do a quick adjustment on our camera so when we actually test this, we can see things a little better. So please set up the same numbers as me. We're going to move this up to 20 on the Y. We're going to move it back -30 on the Z. We're going to tweak the rotation on the X to look down at our ball to 40. And then I'm going to move our field view down to 40. And I like that right there. Please set that up the same way as me. Okay, I think we're ready to start scripting. So let's go and click on our ball, and we're going to go down to add component. We're going to be adding a new script. We're going to be calling this the golf ball controller. Create, add that, and let's open it up. So in this script, we are going to first set up all of our variables before we get into our start and update methods. So I'm just going to make a little bit of space here. And first thing first, we got to add several floats, and I'll explain what each one of these does. But remember, this game is going to be completely controlled by the mouse. Nothing on the keyboard, just mostly the left and right mouse buttons and clicking and dragging and things like that. Okay, so first we're going to be making these private because I don't want you to change these values whatsoever. All of these floats need to be the exact same amount or values that I give you. So the first one, this is going to be called max power. So this is going to regulate the hardest we can hit the golf ball, and we need that to be consistent. So we're going to set that to 50. Our next one does have a pretty long name, but I do want to make it, I'm going to write it the long way. So we're going to call this screen world conversion factor. Now, what is this thing that we just made? We're going to be taking inputs when we click on the screen, and those need to be converted into our 3D space. And I found a number that is 0.002, put an F at the end there for float, works really well. And I'll explain that more when we set that part of the code up. Okay, our next private float that we're going to need is going to be called the velocity threshold. Okay, so this velocity threshold, we're going to be setting it to 1. And what this does, it'll stop our ball once the velocity gets to 1 or less. Because if we don't do this, the ball will continue to roll at really slow speeds, which is not how we usually play the game of golf. We have to let the ball stop, and we don't want to be sitting there waiting forever. Okay, our next private float is going to be called current power. This is where we're going to be storing how much power we are hitting the ball with. So we don't need to define that as a value at all right now. We'll leave it to default to 0. Our last that's all of our private floats, so that's going to be setting us up pretty good there. Next, we're going to need a public reference. So this is going to be a public reference to what's called our line renderer. We're going to be creating a line renderer in this game, and the line renderer is what's going to be drawn on our screen to show the direction and power we are shooting our golf ball with. Next, as usual, we're going to need access to the rigid body. Make sure it's rigid body, not with the 2D. We're going to call that RB for short. We are in 3D, so please call it rigid body. Next, we're going to need a public bool. We're going to use this much later on. That's why we're making it public, but we're going to be calling this is stopped. Okay, so this is going to tell us whether or not the ball is stopped. And of course, we're going to initialize this as true because the ball should start at a stopped position when we open up our golf hole. Okay, now we're going to need some vector 3s. So because we are in 3D space, we're going to use a public vector 3. It's public just so that we can view it. We're not going to be changing this in the inspector, but it's helpful to see. So this is going to be our start shot POS for position. Okay, and we're going to need another public vector 3. We're not going to call it end shot position. We're going to be calling this the shot direction. So you might be getting a sense of how this is going to work. We're going to have a start shot position stored. We're going to have a direction, and then we're going to multiply it by the power to add a force in that direction. So that's what's going to be happening later on. We're also going to add a public int. We're going to use this much later on, but we are going to code it in because it's one line of code that we're going to be using this for. And this is just going to be called shots taken, and we're going to default that to 0. Okay, so that's going to keep track of how many shots we take. All right, let's get going here. Into this start method, we're not doing anything in there. We're going to be initializing that line renderer and that rigid body in the inspector. You could do it in the start, but we're going to not do it that way. We're going to keep things consistent with the other projects, but you could put it in there if you wanted to. Okay, in the update, first thing first, when the ball is moving, we need it to stop so it's ready for us to shoot. So we're going to code that first. It's going to be a bit of a crazy if statement because we're going to be checking two things. First, we're going to be checking the RB dot velocity. So that accesses the current velocity. Now there's an X, a Y, and a Z direction. So I want to look at the Y, and I want to make sure that is less than a really small number. So when I found in testing that 0.0001 F worked really well. 0 had a couple flaws. So I had to tweak it a little bit. Now also, if the ball is falling, this is going to return true. So I don't want that. So we're going to use a function called mathf.abs for absolute. Okay, so that's going to create the absolute value. Put that around your rb.velocity.y. So it's going to make it always positive. So it doesn't matter if the ball is going down or going up. This is checking to make sure it's not currently in the air or moving up or down a slope in your game. So it doesn't accidentally stop the ball when you don't want it to. So it's going to check for that first. And also, simultaneously, I guess, it's going to be checking the magnitude. So the rb.velocity.magnitude, that's going to access a float. So the magnitude, doesn't matter what direction, it'll tell you how fast it's moving. And we want to make sure that is below what we created that float before, our velocity threshold of 1. Okay. Sorry, don't use a semicolon there. We're going to use curly braces now, because what do we do when both of those return true? So that double ampersand, we got to make sure we're not in the air moving up and down at all, and we got to make sure the magnitude, this is kind of focusing on the XZ plane, like left and right, forward and back. We want to make sure this is below 1, so then we can stop the movement. So that's really easy to do. We're going to go rb.velocity, and we're going to set that equal to vector 3, 0. Okay, quick and easy. But the ball's going to be spinning, so we're going to take the angular velocity, and we're going to also set that to 0. Okay, so now those are both set to 0. Our ball will be ready to shoot. So this is a great spot to put a line of code that takes is stopped, and we're going to set that to not false, but true. Okay. Now, that's the main thing why we wanted to stop the ball and make that bool true in the event that it was currently false. So it will be false when the ball is moving. All right, now we're going to make a few more if statements. This first if statement is going to be basically checking if we have clicked on our ball. Okay, so how do we do that? We're going to go if, and it's going to be checking the input dot get mouse button down. Okay, so this is when it's clicked down, not held down, but clicked down. And we do want 0 is the does code for the left mouse button. 1 is for the right mouse button. And we're going to be also making sure the ball is, of course, is stopped. If those two things return true, we are going to see if we hit the ball. So now we're going to be doing what's called a ray cast. This is going to shoot an invisible ray. So we're going to store a quick variable called raycast hit, and we're going to call it hit. And to see the ray, so that's going to store the hit, and the ray is going to be equal to, and this is how we check this. We're going to go camera, it's going to access the camera, main.screen, it's screen to screen point to ray. Where's that? Let's go back here. Screen point to ray. So screen point, there it is. Screen point to ray, and we're going to take the input mouse position. Okay. So now what this is doing is it's going to be shooting a ray into our screen, okay, and it's based off of our mouse position when we click the left mouse button. Okay, so when it shoots this ray, we want to check, hey, did the ray hit anything? So we're going to put an if statement inside here to check for that. So what we use is physics.raycast. And we're going to be using this setup. It's really common, ray out hit. So this is going to say, that's why we established the hit variable before, but this is going to check to see if the ball was clicked to begin the shot. So let's check if we actually hit the ball. So inside here, we're going to check another if statement. And we're going to be putting in hit dot collider dot game object. And we're saying, hey, did what we hit actually match the current game object that this code is, that this script is on, which is the golf ball. So now it's checking for that as well. I'm just missing an extra curly bracket. Let's make sure I put that in. There we go. Okay, now if that's true, this is basically checking now, did I hit the golf ball? Okay, so let's check. Once we know that, we're going to be running a method called start aiming. Now we haven't made this yet, this method or function, but we're going to be coding it down below shortly. Okay, so that's where it's going to be start the aiming. Okay, so now this is ready to go for this portion. Next, I will set up the different functions that we are going to be making. I'll do that really quick so we don't have these errors. So I'm going to go outside of this this if statement. Okay. And make sure I'm outside of the update. So I'm going to go all the way. So notice that I'm outside of the update method now, and I'm going to be making a few methods. So let's create these right now. So first one's going to be called private void, and this one's going to be the one we just created called start aiming. Okay, set that up. It's ready to go. Okay, let's keep going here. Next one is going to be our aim method. So private void aim. Okay, so that one's ready to go. And another one we're going to be using is our shoot. So private void shoot. Okay, we're going to be adding some code into each of those later on. Okay, so now let's get out of this. Make sure we are now, so this is checking if we have clicked on our golf ball. And the way we're going to functionally do things here is we're going to now need to check if the mouse button is being held down, and that's going to allow us to actually aim. So let's do an if right now. So the if is going to be checking again for that same input dot get mouse button, but just get mouse button, not get mouse button down. This will check if the left mouse, so code it for 0 again, is being held down. Of course, for this also to work, we need to make sure we are is stopped is true. So we're going to do double ampersand is stopped is also true. Okay, so this is now going to be controlling what happens when we hold down the mouse button, which is going to be accessing our aim method. Okay, so that one's done. And the last one we're going to need is to actually shoot. And the way this game works is click on the ball, holding it down, you aim and change your power, and when you release, it will shoot the ball. So this one is going to be checking for the same input as before. And if you haven't figured it out yet, it's going to be get mouse button up. Okay, and that's going to be at 0, and we also want to make sure is stopped is true. There we go. And in this if statement, we are going to implement the shoot method. All right. So at this point, this is going to be a good time to stop. This is a longer video, but now that everything's set up, when we go into the next video, we are going to be setting up what happens when we start aiming, when we are aiming, and when we release the mouse button to actually shoot. So please make sure everything is set up so far matching me, and I'll see you in the next video.